News Channel 5 Network. This is Urban Outlook.
Hello and welcome to Urban Outlook. I'm April Eaton. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's an organization that's built on the foundation that everyone should have a proper and a safe place to live. But when you're living check to check, when you've got that fixed income, sometimes the costs of maintaining your home, of making those repairs, go to the back burner when it comes to paying bills and doing other things that need to be done. Rebuilding Together Nashville wants to help families in need of needed home repairs. They've been in business for 23 years now, and we thought we'd talk a little bit about what they're seeing, how they're helping people in the community, especially with maintaining their homes. Thank you so much for being with us. Ed Henley is the board president of Rebuilding Together Nashville, and Caitlin Dustug is the executive director of the organization. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So as I said, you've been around since 1995. Didn't start as Rebuilding Together Nashville, though. So talk a little bit about the history and the name change through the years.
Sure. So we actually began under the name Christmas in April. And it really started from the architecture community here in Nashville, getting together and deciding to help out a few neighbors once a year in April. So they would work, all volunteers, work all year round, raising money, selecting the homeowners they would serve in April, and finding the materials they needed and recruiting volunteers, and then going out and helping as many neighbors as they could. So that continued for many, many years. And then when the flood happened in 2010, it was really a call for the organization to become a disaster response organization.
Wow.
So we built up, was able to kind of receive more resources and really increase our impact in that way. And similarly now, we're kind of called to respond to the affordable housing crisis that's happening in Nashville.
When you first started out, what were some of the things that you saw, the needs that people had back then, even in 1995? And they may be the same needs today, but I just wonder what drove and sparked that desire to want to help those neighbors get their homes fixed?
Sure, and I think it's a similar way that we approach our work now. It's really what skills did the volunteers and the leaders of the organization have that they could give to
So if they were carpenters, then find a family that needed that carpentry work.
I think a lot of it came from being part of the construction community, right? Understanding that there takes a lot of skilled people to make certain things happen. We talk about handyman, and you think of a lot of people having someone they can call to fix certain things around the home. But a lot of homes, especially when you're in an area of need, right, and like you said, the things that happen and become worse over time, they take a more skilled labor and much more resources. And so being involved in a community or in an industry where you have conversations with those people every other day, right? You spend the year making connections and asking them, hey, would you like to do something in a version of giving back and a version of service that can be helpful to those in need? When things that you can do almost in your sleep, right? That they just don't have those communications. And I think as much as matching resources in terms of dollars and in terms of being able to go out and buy and purchase things, it's also using that network, right, that may not be available to those people in certain communities that have these needs, and really just being a conduit to that as well.
And how do you find families, or how do you pick the community that you're going to focus on?
That's a great question. So we actually do very little advertising, but the need is so great that we accept applications directly. And we currently have more families on our wait list than we're able to serve.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's just a huge need out there.
Once the word gets out. So there must be then criteria that you look for families. Talk a little bit about who qualifies for the help.
Sure. So our mission is to serve low-income, single-family homeowners. So that's the first kind of criteria. We look at the entire income for the household and make sure it fits our criteria, which is 80% of area median income and below. We then serve 3 key populations: seniors, which we define as age 60 and older, and then a household where someone in the household has a certified disability. And then we also serve U.S. veterans, so veterans of our armed forces.
And I didn't think about this, but when I think about what needs to be done, sometimes there are little small minor things that you might be able to take care of yourself, right? Just go to the Home Depot, ask a question or two of somebody, buy the right stuff and fix. But there are other repairs that really do take that expert touch, if you will. And I wonder, is there something that tells on average each family has to maintain their home to the tune of how much each year? What do those numbers look like, and how costly can it get for people?
Sure. So I think it depends on the home. It depends on the family and kind of what their resources are. But things like a hot water heater that needs to be replaced, every 10 years, that's a few $1,000s. And if you're living on a fixed income and the cost of your other living expenses are going up, such as medication, healthcare cost,
absolutely,
property taxes, that's a really hard thing to budget.
It makes it further way down the list, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think one thing, a lot of times when you have education process, right, for new homeowners, and you tell them you need to plan on not only the continual maintenance and repair of your home, but also saving for those larger things. And so, like most things in a home, right, they're only good for so long. When we think about appliances that we replace every so often because we see those and interact with those every day. But when you think about gutters and roofing, flooring, windows, right, those things that take 5 to 10 to even 15 years to really hit a point where they start to fail you. Imagine planning 15 years ahead when you're looking week to week.
Right.
It's really difficult. And again, when you have multiple generations in a household, that house that's been in the family for so long, you just know it as operating as it's operated. And a lot of times I think we encounter that when we go into homes, is there are certain things that are in need of immediate repair, right, that we know that this needs to be priority number one for us.
Yeah.
But also assessing the house fully and saying, hey, here are other things that we noticed that either need to be replaced, repaired, or will be in the near future. And so at least raising that flag and saying, hey, we're going to try to do as much as we can with the resources that we have. But we do want to make you aware of other things that may be on the horizon, and to try to encourage them to find or seek any other type of help that we can provide, or be a connector to other resources as well.
That's an interesting point you make too, because I think it's probably a good tip for homeowners to say, each year look around and see what needs to be repaired. And if you can do it, then do it, because once you let those things build year after year, it really becomes that bigger problem.
It does.
So how, some advice for folks who may not be experiencing, some tough times right now, and may not be even experiencing problems with their homes, but how should they really maintain and keep track of the things that are happening in their home so they don't have those major repairs?
I think there's a couple things, an energy savings type of model I think are the one major way to do it. So if you go into rooms and you notice one area of the room is colder than others, you're always encouraged to, smoke detectors, right? And everybody knows to test
Check
those.
whenever the time
But
change.
there are also a lot of other routines, such as changing your air filters, right? You want people to clean out their gutters every fall, which can be dangerous. Which can be dangerous.
Absolutely.
Which can be dangerous. And there are tools, like hose pipe extensions that will allow you to kind of blow those out.
Okay.
But different things like that. If you do have a crawl space, which I'm not a fan of getting into the crawl spaces myself.
I don't even want to think about that.
But also the attics, right? A lot of times you may have poor insulation or air filtration or water intrusion, right? That if you're just walking around your home, you don't notice that stain on the ceiling, right? But when you finally do, it's probably because you've had some issue for, could be months, weeks. And so just becoming more familiar with your homes in those areas that you usually avoid could be a big deal. And also just noticing things like creaky floorboards when you're walking into a room could be
what is that a sign of, by the way?
So a lot of times it's going to be a sign of air intrusion in your home, because you're walking and it's some kind of movement, and movement is a very, very bad thing for your home structure. And quite honestly, one of the things that we love to get involved with earlier is those signs, because one thing for us is when we have a minimum amount of resources per home or project or build that we can do, the earlier we can catch something, the better. One thing I think is the most disheartening for our organization is to go into a home and say it is in so much disrepair that we honestly can't address that.
Wow.
And structural issues are usually the most costly. Structural, HVAC, just because you have to find a way to get to those issues. And then also the inconvenience on the homeowner is the greatest.
But there's some natural settling, they say, that a home does, right? Which is okay settling.
Absolutely.
But the creaking floorboards and other things can mean a bigger movement problem?
Yes, and I'll say this, and one big mission of the organization is to create a safe and healthy home, and the healthy portion of that I think is really key there, because when you have water and moisture intrusion into the home, it may structurally seem fine, but you do start to have issues with mold, right? And you start to have problems that are caused with respiratory systems for those living there in the house. And so that's something that we've noticed quite often is when you don't get under those floorboards and when you don't get into the wall in those areas where you've noticed those signs, you know, you can have a mold buildup and it can be doing more damage to the person's health versus just the stability of the household, which again is just as expensive in the long run when you think about it. And you know, the most valuable thing is someone's safety, right? The life. And a lot of times we don't want the homes to be in an area where people aren't comfortable on a day-to-day basis, but also they aren't unknowingly in a very unsafe situation.
I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to continue the conversation and talk a little bit about what you're seeing today as our city changes. What kinds of things are people still needing help with? We'll be right back after this. Stay with us.